All right, let's dive into these Path of Exile 2 patch notes. And whoa, these are not just like little tweaks. This is a big one.
Yeah, this is a hefty patch. Lots of changes. It's impressive. Pretty much every part of the game got looked at. Quality of life, skill reworks, the whole works.
So where do we even start with something this massive?
Well, I think those quality of life changes are a good place. The devs have definitely been reading what players are saying, and they've made some changes to make things smoother.
Yeah, like that fast travel between checkpoints. No more running back and forth across a whole map just to check one corner. That's a game changer.
For sure. It just makes exploring so much easier. It lets players really explore every nook and cranny. It's one of those things you don't realize you needed until it's there.
And for the build tinkerers like me, those cheaper respecs are going to be amazing, especially in the end game, where specing could get so expensive.
Oh yeah, it's going to make theory crafting so much more portable. Players can test out different builds, adapt to tough content, without feeling like they're going broke every time they change something.
This is already sounding like a great patch, and we're just getting started. What other quality of life stuff is there?
Well, there are a bunch of smaller changes that are still pretty big, like the advanced skill info shortcut. You can just right-click a skill now instead of going through all the menus.
Oh, nice. I've definitely gotten lost in those menus more than a few times.
And for gamepad users, you can finally compare your equipped flasks. It's a small change, but it makes a big difference for controller players.
It's the little things, right? Okay, so fast travel, cheaper respecs, and some nice quality of life tweaks. What's next?
Things are about to get interesting. Let's talk endgame and monster balance.
That's where things could really get shaken up. What do they do?
One of the biggest changes is no more elemental resistance penalties in high-tier maps. That's huge.
Wait, so no more stacking resistance just to survive those high-level maps?
That's right.
That's going to make a big difference.
It will. How people gear for endgame is going to change. It'll be interesting to see how it affects builds. And if we see more elemental damage builds now, those were too fragile for the late game before.
So many possibilities. What other monster balance changes are there?
They also nerfed monster crits and chaos damage scaling in the endgame. Players had a lot to say about survivability, especially in the toughest content, so they made some adjustments.
So no more getting one shot by a random crit. I like that.
Exactly. It makes the endgame feel fairer, less about luck. It encourages players to build solid defenses, not just rely on dodging the occasional lucky hit.
Sounds like they're making endgame more accessible without making it easy. How about changes to specific monsters or encounters?
There are a bunch. The Rune Knight is getting nerfed. His laser and lightning attacks are getting toned down.
Oh, good. That guy was a pain, especially up close.
And you know those volatile crystals? The ones that exploded if you looked at them wrong?
Yeah.
Gone. At least for now.
Thank goodness. Sometimes it felt like there was just no avoiding those things. It's good to see them addressing those frustrating mechanics. What about any other notable monster changes?
Let's see. Trail of Fire, Ice, and Lightning modifiers are shorter now. Purple explosives from volatile plants do less damage. Prowling chimeral packs are less dense.
So lots of little tweaks to smooth things out.
Just fine-tuning the difficulty, making sure encounters are tough but fair.
Speaking of tough, how about the Trial of the Secamus? Any changes there?
You bet. The big one is how honor damage scales with distance. You'll take less damage when you're closer to enemies, so it encourages a more aggressive playstyle.
So no more hiding in a corner. I like that.
And they fixed a couple of bugs. One where damage over time was doing triple damage to honor, and another where honor resistance wasn't working right, so the trial should be less punishing now.
Good to hear. I always felt like the trial really depended on specific builds and strategies.
Speaking of strategies, let's move on to skill balance.
All right, time for the nitty-gritty. What approach did they take with the skill changes?
Oh, they've been busy. The patch notes are full of adjustments. It looks like they're trying to buff skills that weren't used much, tone down the overpowered ones, and make some mechanics just feel better.
Sounds like a good approach. Where should we start?
Let's start with bow skills. They got some pretty big reworks. Barrage, Ice Shot, and Tornado Shot have all been adjusted.
Garage was always a bit clunky. What do they do?
They reduced the damage penalty on barraged attacks and gave it more base repeats, so it's better for sustained single target damage.
So a buff for those who like to rain down arrows.
Nice.
What about Ice Shot?
Ice Shot got a major overhaul. Its shards get more projectiles as they level up. They target a wider area and travel further. Plus, they're visually smaller, so they're easier to see.
So they fixed some of the things that made Ice Shot awkward to use. What about Tornado Shot?
Its damage over time was adjusted. It's a bit higher at lower levels, lower at higher levels, so it's better for spreading other bow skills, not so much as a main damage source.
So they're encouraging players to use it with other bow skills.
Exactly. And speaking of combinations, we can't forget support gems. We got two new ones, Tremors and Bidding.
Ooh. New toys. Tell me more.
Tremors lets you add more aftershocks to skills, but with a damage penalty. And Bidding gives more damage to the command skills of supported minions.
More options for customization. I love it.
Yeah.
What about changes to existing support gems? Anything interesting?
The exposure support gems, Fire, Lightning, and Cold, don't have a damage penalty anymore. They have a mana cost multiplier now.
So no damage penalty, but they cost more mana. Seems like a fair trade.
It is. It makes them a more strategic choice.
Okay, so quality of life, endgame and monster balance, and some exciting updates to bow skills and support gems. Where to next?
We've only just scratched the surface of skill changes. There's a lot more to talk about, including some big buff to melee skills. And melee fans have a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, melee's always been a big part of Path of Exile. It's good to see it getting some attention.
One big change is to Rolling Slam. Its second slam now hits heavy stunned enemies 50% harder.
Whoa, that's a big boost. I can already hear the sound of slamming into a bunch of stunned enemies. What kind of build is this going to be good for?
This is going to be huge for builds that focus on crowd control, especially ones that can stun enemies reliably. Imagine pairing it with a skill that can stun a whole group at once. You could make some really powerful combos.
Awesome. Any other melee skills getting buffed?
Staggering Palm got a nice buff too. It lasts longer as it levels up, and its projectiles do more damage.
Well, I love Staggering Palm. It's great for offense and defense. What kind of impact are these changes going to have?
It's going to be a much stronger and more consistent option. The longer duration means you can stagger enemies more often, which is great for crowd control and interrupting attacks. And the damage boost makes it a real threat on offense.
I'm already thinking about new build ideas. It sounds like the developers are really trying to make melee feel more impactful.
They are, and it's not just melee and bows getting attention. Spells got some love too.
Oh, right. What kind of changes did they make?
A bunch of spells got damage increases, like Unearth, Bone Cage, Essence Drain, Contagion, Profane Ritual, and Chaos Bolt.
So a general power boost.
Seems like it. This is good news for skills like Unearth and Bone Cage. They weren't that great before. These changes might make them more popular for different builds.
I always like seeing underused skills get some attention. Any specific spell adjustments worth mentioning?
Bone Cage now has a higher base crit chance, so it's better for crit builds. Imagine combining that with the damage increase. It could be pretty strong.
Crit Bone Cage builds. Can't wait to see what people come up with. Are there any other spell changes worth mentioning?
They made some adjustments to Skeleton Arsonists. Their spirit costs are the same as Frost and Ice Mages now from level 5 on.
So they cost more to summon?
Yes, but it makes sense considering how much damage they can do. It's all about balancing the costs and benefits of different summons.
Speaking of balance, what about shield skills? Did they get any adjustments?
They did. Some shield skills, like Resonating Shield, Shield Charge, and Shield Wall, now do more physical damage based on your shield's armor.
So more armor on your shield means more damage? That's cool.
It is. It encourages players to focus on armor if they're using those skills. Could lead to some interesting builds.
What about any other changes to those shield skills specifically?
Resonating Shield's radius is bigger, and Shield Wall can make 2 walls now instead of 1, and the explosions are bigger too.
Wow, that's a big buff for shield skills. I can see some shield builds getting really strong.
Definitely. It'll be fun to see how players change their builds to use these new shield mechanics. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Shield Charge builds make a comeback.
It's great to see the developers trying new things and giving players more options.
It is. And speaking of options, let's talk about item balance.
Okay, time for loot. What kind of goodies are in store for us?
One big change is that you can get charm modifiers on belts more easily now. They're more common and show up at lower levels.
That's great. Charms can be so strong. But getting the right ones felt like a matter of luck sometimes. This will open up a lot of builds, especially for newer players.
Exactly. It lets players experiment with different charms without feeling like they're losing power or progress.
It makes the game feel more rewarding. Less about grinding for those perfect charms. What about unique items? Any changes there?
There's an interesting change to the Adorned, a unique item. It works with time-lost jewels now.
Okay, I'll be honest. I'm not sure what time-lost jewels are or why this change is a big deal. Can you explain?
Sure. Time-lost jewels are unique jewels with strong modifiers. They affect a lot of passive skills around where you socket them. They can really change your passive tree. The Adorned lets you copy the modifiers from one jewel to another.
So if you use the Adorned on a time-lost jewel, you can basically double its effect. That sounds pretty powerful.
Yeah. It is. It's a very specific change, but it could create some really strong combinations for players who really like to dive into the game's mechanics.
It's definitely a change for those who like to push the limits of builds.
It is. It shows how deep and complex Path of Exile's item system is.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot. Quality of life, endgame and monster balance, skill reworks for melee, bows, spells, and shields, and even item balance. What else is there?
We can't forget about bug fixes. Every patch has them, and this one is no different. Wrapping up our Path of Exile 2 patch notes deep dive, we've talked about so much. Skill reworks, balance changes, quality of life improvements, even those time lost jewels.
Yeah, a lot to cover. But we can't forget about those bug fixes. Oh, right. Bug fixes might not be as exciting as new skills or items, but they're super important to keep the game running smoothly and make sure everyone has a good experience. What are some of the highlights from this patch's bug fixing?
Well, there's one that stands out if you've used the Atlas passive tree. They fix a bug where the crumbling walls passive was affecting maps that didn't even have breaches.
So it was working a little too well. Definitely good to have that fixed. It's always annoying when something doesn't work the way it should. Any other fixes that address those kinds of things?
They also fixed that bug with phantom frost walls. They could stick around and create invisible walls.
Oh, I can see how that would be frustrating, especially in the middle of a fight. It's good they're getting rid of those little bugs that mess with gameplay. What about any fixes that are just funny? Sometimes those are the best ones.
Oh, there's one. They fixed a bug where the explosion from armor explosion support could explode things that weren't supposed to explode.
Wait, so like barrels and crates were exploding?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I kind of wish they kept that in, just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I get it. Those weird bugs can be fun. But for balance and consistency, it's probably better that it's fixed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about fast travel, cheaper respects, skill reworks, monster adjustments, item balance changes, even those unsung heroes, the bug fixes. It's clear this patch is making Path of Exile 2 better, more balanced, more fun for all players. But what does it all mean in the long run? What kind of impact are these changes going to have?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's hard to say for sure, but I think we can make some guesses. Like getting rid of those elemental resistance penalties and high-tier wraps. That's a huge change. It could completely change the endgame meta.
It's like they're telling players, go crazy, try new things. I can't wait to see what kind of builds people come up with now.
Yeah. And with cheaper respects, players can experiment more. Try out new ideas without worrying about wasting resources. This patch really encourages people to keep changing and refining their builds.
It's exciting. So many possibilities.
It is. And it's not just the end game that's changing. The changes to skills, support, gems, items, they're going to affect the whole game.
From leveling to the toughest endgame content, it feels like this patch is touching every part of the game.
Exactly. It's a big update. It shows the developers are really dedicated to making Path of Exile 2 the best it can be.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I have one question for you, and for everyone listening. What are you most excited to try in this patch? What new builds are you thinking about? What challenges are you ready to take on? Let us know.
Go out there and explore.
Until next time.